What's good, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Mystery Unsolved. I am, of course, your host, Justin Bienvenu. Wasn't sure I was going to do this tonight, feeling a little under the weather, but nevertheless, we're doing this. Tonight's episode is going to be on the Mary Celeste. I do remember at the end of last week's video, I said it could be a bit on the spooky side, but I was confusing that with another ship. All right. Hopefully I can get through this without any issue. Without further ado, Mystery Unsolved, the Mary Celeste. Mary Celeste, often erroneously referred to as Marie Celeste, was an American registered merchant brigantine, best known for being discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean off the Azores Islands on December 4th, 1872. The Canadian brigantine Gradia found her disheveled but seaworthy condition under partial sail and with her lifeboat missing. The last entry in her log was dated 10 days earlier. She had left New York City for Genoa on November 7th and was still amply provisioned when found. Her cargo of alcohol was intact, and the captain's and crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. None of those who had been on board were ever seen or heard from again. So this one we got a little bit of a twist, if you will. Normally, when we have ships that go disappearing, the entire ship can't be found. Although there was one, I think, a couple weeks back where they actually, years later, they found parts of the ship. But this one, they found the ship intact with shit on it, but nobody on it. All right. Excuse me. We got a lot of stuff here to go over, but obviously it might not be, so I'm gonna just go over this a little bit here. Mary Celeste was built on Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, and launched under British registration as Amazon in 1861. She was transferred to American ownership and registration in 1868, when she acquired her new name. Thereafter, she sailed uneventfully until 1872 at the salvage hearings in Gibraltar following her recovery. Okay, so the ship does sail. It did sail. All right, we got early history. All right, here we go. So when did it actually go missing? Let's get that date. It doesn't actually say at the top. Uneventful until 1872. Okay. Okay, 1872 is when it went missing. Okay. Just making sure. On October 20th, 1872, Briggs arrived at Pier 50 on East River in New York City. Good old East River. To supervise the loading of the ship's cargo of alcohol. His wife and infant daughter joined him a week later. On Sunday, November 3rd, Briggs wrote to his mother to say that he intended to leave on Tuesday, adding that our vessel is in beautiful trim, and I hope that we shall have a fine passage. On Tuesday morning, November 5th, Mary Celeste left Pier 50 with Briggs, his wife and daughter, and 7 crew members, and moved into New York Harbor. The weather was uncertain, and Briggs decided that to wait for better conditions. He anchored the ship just off Staten Island, where Sarah used the delay to send a final letter to her mother-in-law. Tell Arthur, she wrote. Okay. While Mary Celeste prepared to sail, the Canadian brigantine Gradia Gratia, I'm probably mispronouncing that, lay nearby Hoboken, New Jersey, awaiting a cargo of petroleum destined for Genoa via Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse and First Mate Oliver Devoe were Nova Scotians, both highly experienced and respected seamen. Captain Briggs and Morehouse shared common interests, and some writers think it was likely that they knew each other, if only casually. Okay. Hoping not to cough, but there we go. Some accounts assert that they were close friends who. Okay, they're good friends. What's the point? There's a lot of rhetoric, a ton of it, between back and forth. Okay, we know this. Okay. The ship's erratic movements and the odd set of her sails led Morehouse to suspect that something was wrong. As the vessels drew close, he could see nobody. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Maybe I skipped too much already? My bad. Some accounts assert that they were close friends who dined together. Okay. Together on the evening before Mary Celeste's departure. But the evidence for this is limited to a recollection by Morehouse's widow 50 years after the event. DeGradia departed for Gibraltar on November 15th, following the same general route 8 days after the Mary Celeste. Okay. Apparently that's important. Excuse me. DeGradia had reached a position on December 4th. Captain Morehouse came on deck and the helmsman reported a vessel heading unsteadily towards DeGradia at a distance damn it. Of about 6 miles. The ship's erratic movements and the odd set of her sails led Morehouse to suspect that something was wrong. As the vessels drew close, he could no longer see nobody. He could see nobody on deck, and received no reply to his signals, and sent Devoe and a second mate, John Wright, in the ship's boat to investigate. The pair established that this was the Mary Celeste by the name on her stern, then climbed aboard and found the ship deserted. The sails were partly set, in poor condition, some missing altogether, and much of the rig was damaged, with ropes hanging loosely over the sides. The main hatch cover was secure, but the fore and the lazarette hatches were open, their covers beside them on the deck. The ship's single lifeboat was a small yawl that had been apparently stowed across the main hatch, but it was missing, while the binnacle housing the ship's compass had shifted from its place and the cover was broken. There's nothing there, but I can feel it. It's just like, it's because I'm talking so much, so. A makeshift sounding rod, a device for measuring the amount of water in the hold, was found abandoned on the deck. So basically, there's a lot of stuff intact. Nobody's on the ship, but some stuff that should be intact is actually broken. They found the ship's daily log in the mate's cabin, and its final entry was dated at 8 a.m. on November 25. That's what it says, 25th, 9 days earlier. It recorded Mary Celeste's position off of Santa Maria Island, from the point where DeGradia encountered her. Devoe saw that the cabin interiors were wet and untidy from water that had entered through doorways and skylights, but were otherwise in reasonable order. He found personal items scattered about Briggs's cabin, including a sheathed sword under the bed, but most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments. Galley equipment was neatly stowed away. There was no food prepared. but there was ample provisions in the stores. There were no obvious signs of fire or violence. The evidence indicated an orderly departure from the ship by means of the missing lifeboat. So basically, they're trying to find like missing items that would make sense if they were not on the ship, or stuff that's on the ship that should you basically stuff that belongs on the ship and stuff that doesn't belong on the ship that they would take with them, and they can't really differentiate between the two because some stuff is missing, some stuff isn't. It's just very bizarre. DeVoe returned to report his findings. Under the maritime, Morehouse divided the Gradia's crew of 8 between 2 vessels, sending DeVoe and 2 experienced seamen to the Mary Celeste, while he and 4 others remained on the Gradia. The weather was relatively calm. Mary Celeste had encountered fog. The Gradia reached Gibraltar on December 12th. Mary Celeste had encountered fog and arrived on the following morning. She was immediately impounded by the Vice and Admiralty Court to prepare for salvage hearings. DeVoe wrote to his wife that the ordeal of bringing the ship in was such that I can hardly tell what I am made of, but I do not care so much as I got it in safe. I shall be paid well for the Mary Celeste. Okay, so the ship arrived, but there was nobody on it, and they faced, I guess, issues. The salvage hearings? We don't really care about that. We want to know what happened to the ship, right? We want to know. One moment. All right. We got some proposed explanations as to what happened to the ship, so we're going to hear this out. Foul play. The evidence in Gibraltar failed to support the Flood's theories of murder. Whoa, wait a minute. How does it gets right into that? Oh, I guess there's a guy named Flood under. Sorry. Frederick Solly Flood. The hearing was conducted by Frederick Solly Flood. We're going to have to read the Gibraltar salvage hearings, apparently. Okay, Flood was described by an historian of the Mary Celeste. Okay. DeVoe and Wright convinced Flood unalterably that a crime had been committed. So the 2 guys that investigated the Mary Celeste, they think a crime was committed. Because again, nobody was aboard. Certain things were intact. Other things weren't. Certain things were on the ship. Other things weren't. And none of it made any sense. A belief picked up by the New York Shipping and Commercial List on December 21st. The inference is that there had been foul play somewhere, and that alcohol is at the bottom of it. Oh. Throw a little bit of alcohol into the mix. On December 23rd, Flood ordered an examination of the Mary Celeste. Austin notes cuts on each side of the bow caused, he thought, by a sharp instrument, and found possible traces of blood on the captain's sword. Remember that sword they found under the bed? His report emphasized that the ship did not appear to have been struck by heavy weather, citing a view of sewing machine oil found upright in its place. Austin did not acknowledge that the vial might have been replaced since abandonment, nor did the court raise the point. Another guy concluded that the ship had not been involved in a collision or run aground. So in other words, weather, not really a factor here. And they keep kind of emphasizing that point because remember, the other ship that was apparently the other ship was with them, the Digradia. So if they made it, the other ship made it too. It's just nobody was aboard. A further inspection by the group of Royal Naval captains endorsed Austin's opinion that the cuts on the bow had been caused deliberately. They also discovered stains on one of the ship's rails that may have been blood, together with a deep mark possibly caused by an axe. Blood on the sword, blood on the axe. Okay, I can see why they might think this is murder. I can see that. These findings strengthens Flood's suspicions that human wrongdoing rather than natural disaster lay behind the mystery. On January 22nd, 1873, he sent reports, adding his own conclusion that the crew had got at the alcohol and hold on. So this is okay. He sent reports on the Board of Trade in London, adding his own conclusion that the crew had got at the alcohol, so they were drinking, and murdered the Briggs family and the ship's officers in a drunken frenzy. But who did? The other crew members? Oh, the crew did. Okay, I'm sorry, I read that really fast. That they had cut the bows to simulate a collision, then fled in the yawl which is the yawl is the lifeboat, to suffer an unknown fate. Flood thought that Morehouse and his men were hiding something, specifically that Mary Celeste had been abandoned in a more easterly location, and that the log had been doctored. He could not accept that Mary Celeste could have traveled so far uncrewed. That is kind of weird. Flood demanded. Okay, this is Flood's testimony. Flood's theories of mutiny and murder received significant setbacks when scientific analysis of the stains found on the sword and elsewhere on the ship showed that they were not blood. Oh. Huh. That's interesting. Little traces of red on the top of a sword, but it's not blood. A second blow to Flood followed in a report commissioned by Horatio Sprague. In Sheffield's view, the marks on the bow were not man-made, but came from natural actions of the sea on the ship's timbers. This is one of the things that you're always going to come across in a case like this. Something on the ship has been doctored. It's been messed up. Immediately, people think, hey, somebody cut it. But then later analysis, further analysis, deep analysis, whatever you want to call it, on second thought, it was actually nature. Okay. So basically, the end of these hearings, Flood reluctantly released Mary Celeste from the court's jurisdiction. So basically, the hearings were pretty much what they sound like. Is Flood made these two, like, hey, the crew went crazy from drinking and murdered Briggs and his family and everybody else. And they're like, that wasn't blood. The bow wasn't cut. You have nothing. Pretty much. All right. Proposed explanations. The evidence in Gibraltar failed to support Flood's theory of murder and conspiracy, yet suspicion lingered of foul play. Okay. Flood and some newspaper reports briefly suspected insurance fraud on the part of Winchester on the basis that Mary Celeste had been heavily overinsured. This is interesting. Winchester was able to refute these allegations, and no inquiry was instituted by the insurance companies that issued policies. Morehouse could have lain in wait for the Mary Celeste, then lured Briggs and his crew aboard the Delgradia and killed them there. Paul Begg argues that this theory ignores the fact that Delgradia was the slower ship. She left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste and would not have caught Mary Celeste before she reached Gibraltar. Yeah, see, so the ship was trailing behind the Mary Celeste. So this theory was that the guy that Morehouse, who was the commanding officer of the Delgradia, brought the people aboard from the Mary Celeste and murdered them. But they were like a week's worth behind them. So that's not even possible. Another theory posits that Briggs and Morehouse were partners in a conspiracy. Okay, so remember I asked why is it important if they're friends? Remember, it said that they were kind of sort of close. Maybe they were acquaintances, but not friends. Another theory posits that Briggs and Morehouse were partners in a conspiracy to share the salvage proceedings. The unsubstantiated friendship between the two captains has been cited by commentators as making such a plan a plausible explanation. Hicks commented that if Morehouse and Briggs were planning such a scam, they would not have devised such an attention-drawing mystery. He also asked why Briggs left his son, Arthur, behind if he intended to disappear permanently. Another suggested event was that an attack by Riffian pirates who were off the coast of Morocco in the 1870s. However, Charles Eddie Fay observed that pirates would have looted the ship, yet personal possessions of the captain and crew were left undisturbed. The other thing that I said, they couldn't make heads or tails of all the stuff that was on the ship that shouldn't have been, and the stuff that was gone that didn't need to be taken. So, okay. In 1925, historian John Gilbert Lockhart surmised that Briggs slaughtered all on board, then killed himself in a fit of religious mania. Lockhart later spoke to Briggs's descendants, and he apologized and withdrew his theory in a later edition of his book. The problem with that is that if anybody was murdered on the ship, there would be evidence. There would be tons of blood. But they even said that there was blood on the sword. There wasn't blood. Lifeboat. Briggs's cousins later suggested that the transfer of personnel to the yawl may have been intended as a temporary safety measure. However, Mary Celeste may have sailed away empty if the line had parted, leaving the yawl adrift and its occupants. MacDonald Hastings points out that Briggs was an experienced captain and asks whether he would have effected a panicked abandonment. If the Mary Celeste had blown her timbers, she would still have been a better bet for survival than the ship's boat. If this is what happened, says Hastings, Briggs behaved like a fool, worse, a frightened one. See, that one's not a bad theory, though. The timbers may have broken the ship. And any experienced captain knows that even if that happens, you can still sail the ship. But maybe he was in a frantic panic, and he was like, no, we have to abandon ship. That would make sense. That would explain why everything's still on the ship, why the belongings were on the ship, why there was no show of foul play. Another person wrote a similar lifeboat theory. The rope was not cut, not untied, which indicated when the Mary Celeste abandoned it was done quickly. Several times in the ship's logs there had been mention of an ominous rumbling. A lit cigar. Okay. Putnam ends his theory that, in a panic terror, the captain, family, and crew piled into the lone lifeboat, cut the rope, and set out to sea, abandoning the vessel. That kind of makes sense. There's no natural phenomena. Commentators, okay. A sounding rod found on deck. He suggests that Briggs abandoned the ship after a false sounding because of a malfunction of the pumps. A severe waterspout strike. Okay. There's tons of paragraphs here. Okay. So let's break these down, shall we? What happened to the Mary Celeste? Theory number one, everybody in the ship was murdered, and the Captain Briggs did it, and he killed himself. But that did not happen. There would be clear evidence of bloodstains. People would be on board. Like, you'd find bodies out in the water. There was no mention of that. Did they ever find the people's bodies? There's no mention of that. But it wasn't murder. The lifeboat theory, I kind of like this one. Basically, something messed up on the ship, whether it was the timbers or the sound rod and the water spouts. Basically, something on the ship broke. That wasn't a big deal. They could have kept sailing, but the captain was apparently panicking to the point where he was frantically saying, "We have to abandon ship." I think that's what happened. I think the captain was just kind of like, maybe he was kind of like seasickness and kind of got to him, and he was basically like, "Yeah, we have to abandon ship." And maybe somebody on the ship was like, "It's not that bad." But he was like, no, you don't understand. I'm the captain. I know these things. We have to abandon ship. Which would explain why so many things were on the ship were intact. So I think that's what it was. A natural phenomena or the lifeboat theory, why they got on. But what happened to them after is the big question. Myths and false theories. Okay, here we go. Oh, again, it's just a bunch of books that were written and stuff. Very interesting. Again, just a bunch of rhetoric. All right. What do you think happened to the Mary Celeste? Do you think the captain went absolutely batshit crazy and murdered everybody, including his family and then himself? But then again, if he did, why is there no evidence of blood on the ship? And where are the bodies? There's a lot of people he could have had to. They never found bodies in the water. No mention of that. Was it a natural phenomena? Like something on the ship broke? And did the captain just kind of say, "Hey, we need to abandon ship"? That's what I think happened. What do you think? I usually don't say it anymore, but I started saying it again more recently. For those that watch this in the playback, if you have any theories, you know what to do. Leave them in the comments below. Do be sure to like this video. And do stay tuned next week as I will be talking about... I should always try to just have this ready to go, but hey, I'm not a professional. What do you want? Stay tuned next week for Mystery Unsolved as I will be talking about Ettore Majorana. Who is that? I guess you'll have to find out. For Mystery Unsolved, I am Justin Bienvenu. Thank you for watching The Disappearance of the Mary Celeste, and until next week.